Some towns are ruled by guns. Brinehook Wells is ruled by thirst. Here, power isn't a badge on a chest. It's a brass key on a chain, a stamp in a clean hand, and a man who can decide whether your family drinks or learns to swallow dust. Elias Ward rides in at high noon with grit on his coat and silence in his eyes, not looking for trouble, not looking for glory, just looking for water. He steps toward the main trough in the square, reaches for the tin dipper, and a boot snaps it away so the cup skitters across the boards like a thrown insult. "Permits only," a man in a neat vest says, smiling like a preacher. Behind Elias, another voice slips in close, confident enough to stand where a legend's shadow should be. "Old man," it murmurs, "you don't drink without a mark in Brinehook." Elias doesn't flinch. He sets one hand on the trough rail. Calm as packed earth. "That's a strange way to serve water," he says, and the men laugh because they think calm means weak. The crowd has already heard the rumor. The old gravedigger who opened a chain door back in Dry Creek. The man who made clean monsters look dirty in daylight. But rumors don't matter when you're dying of thirst. People keep their heads down and their mouths closed because in Brinehook Wells, silence is the first ration, then the square parts like a curtain, and Silas Dre walks through as if the heat itself steps aside for him. Water commissioner, clean cuffs, clean boots, clean hands, the kind of clean you get when other people do your starving for you. He doesn't yell, he doesn't threaten. He simply looks at Elias with the polite disappointment of a man correcting bad manners. "Elias Ward," Dre says, tasting the name like it's new. "I expected a legend. I got a thirsty old man." Elias meets his eyes without blinking. "Then give the town water," Elias replies. Dre's smile widens. The town gets what it earns. A bell rings and the square shifts. This isn't a trough. It's a ceremony. Dre's men drag out a small folding table and set it beside the pump spigot like an altar. On the table sits a stamp press, iron, heavy, polished, and a box of brass tags no bigger than a thumb, each stamped with a house number. Dre lifts one like it's holy. "These are your valve tags," he announces softly, so everyone leans in. "If you have one, you drink. If you don't, you pray for rain." A mother steps forward with a child on her hip. The boy's lips cracked, his eyes too tired for his age. She holds out an old brass tag on a string. Dre examines it, then tilts his head. "Expired," he says. The mother's face collapses. "Please," she whispers, "just a little." Dre doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't curse. He simply takes the tag, presses the stamp down hard, and the stamp bites into the brass with a sharp clack that makes the whole square flinch. He hands it back. The mother looks. Relief flashes until she sees the new mark, cut. Then Dre lifts the dipper, fills it, and pours the water into the dirt at her feet. The mud drinks first. The child watches the puddle with a hunger that isn't for food. Dre smiles gently. "Order," he says, "requires sacrifice." That's the moment the town realizes the legend didn't ride into Brinehook Wells to start a fight. The fight was already here. Elias stands very still. The men behind him tighten, waiting for him to explode. Because if the legend explodes, Dre gets to call it proof. Elias doesn't explode. He steps toward the table and looks at the stamp press like he's measuring a coffin. "That stamp decides who drinks," Elias says. Dre nods. "It decides who obeys," he corrects. Elias's eyes drift to the brass tags, to the crispness of the marks, and then he sees it, tied around the stamp handle, neat as a signature. A black cord knotted twice, deliberate, familiar. A black double knot. Not just control, a message. Someone wants Elias to notice. Dre follows Elias's gaze and chuckles. "Pretty, isn't it?" he says. A little reminder, this town runs on rules, Mr. Ward. Even legends need permits. Dre gestures and a guard slides in close, nudging Elias with the muzzle of a pistol just to make sure the square understands who is allowed to stand where. You'll help us, Dre continues, voice still soft. A pipeline to the pump station has been sabotaged. You'll dig it up and repair it before sundown. If you do, you drink. If you don't. Dre glances at the mother, the child, the puddle sinking into dirt. Then you learn what dry days feel like. The crowd watches Elias like he's either their last hope or their last mistake. Elias doesn't argue. He doesn't plead. He simply nods once, the way a man nods when he's decided not to waste breath. Dre smiles, satisfied, because he thinks that nod means surrender. Dre's men march Elias toward the edge of town where trenches cut through hard earth like fresh scars. They hand him a shovel as if it's a joke. Elias takes it like it's an old friend, and while the guards watch him dig, Elias listens to the ground. Dirt tells truths men don't. He peels back soil and finds the pipe. It isn't broken. It isn't even old. The bolts are bright. The joints are newly tightened. This wasn't sabotage. This was a reroute. Water diverted away from the poor shacks and toward the hill where Dre's house sits behind shade cloth with a private trough that never dries. A pebble taps Elias's boot. He doesn't look up. Another pebble, then something small slides into the trench. A brass tag on a string. Not a house number, just a plain tag with one letter punched into it. T. Elias glances sideways. A thin boy stands at a distance near stacked barrels, half hidden, eyes sharp as fence nails. Too young to be fearless and too hungry to be polite. He flicks his chin toward Elias's hand and whispers without moving his lips. Don't fix it. Elias keeps digging, but his voice drops to the dirt. Name, he murmurs. The boy hesitates. Tom, he mutters. Then he vanishes like he was never there. Dre's men return before dusk. Dre comes too, strolling beside the trench like he's inspecting crops. Elias wipes his hands and says the truth flatly. It wasn't sabotaged. Dre smiles as if hearing a child insist the sky is blue. Everything is sabotaged if I say it is, he replies. Patch what I tell you to patch. He leans closer, lowering his voice just enough to feel personal. You don't have to like me, Ward. You only have to obey. Because if you don't, the town will blame you for what I do next. He glances toward the square where folks still stand in line, clutching brass tags like prayers. They'll beg me to stop, and I will, if they beg loud enough. Elias feels anger rise. Old, hot, familiar. He crushes it down. Men like Dre count on shortcuts. Elias gives another nod, quiet as surrender, and Dre walks away pleased, convinced he's just taught a legend his place. But when the sun slips low and Brinehook Wells turns the color of old bone, Elias doesn't go home. He doesn't have one. He walks back toward the square instead, where the stamp press sits guarded beside the spigot like a throne. The line is still there. People don't leave because they're afraid the trough will vanish the second they step away. A guard lifts the stamp and clacks it down on tag after tag. Approved, approved, cut approved, deciding lives with a wrist flick. Elias steps into the edge of the lantern light. Move! The guard snaps. Elias looks past him at the brass tags, at the box, at the black double knot tied around the stamp handle like a promise. That thing doesn't belong here, Elias says. The guard laughs. It belongs to Dre, and Dre belongs to nobody. A scream cuts through the line. The same mother from earlier has fallen to her knees, begging again, holding her child whose breath now rasps like sandpaper. Dre has returned to watch the lessons sink in. He doesn't look cruel. He looks bored. "No tag," he says. "No water." Elias steps forward. "Give the boy a drink," he says. Dre turns and smiles at the town. "You hear that?" he asks warmly. "The legend wants charity." Then he faces Elias. "You want him to drink?" Dre lifts the dipper, fills it, and holds it out, just far enough that the mother reaches for it. Then Dre tips it again, water spilling into dust. "Tell your legend thank you," Dre tells the mother. "He just bought you hope. Hope is expensive." That's when Elias does something that isn't loud, but it lands like thunder. He grabs the stamp press by the base, lifts it, and flips it into the trough. Iron hits water with a heavy splash. The press sinks and clunks against the bottom like a stone in a well. For a heartbeat, nobody moves. Dre's smile freezes. The guards step in, hands on pistols. Elias stands with his empty hands open. "There," Elias says. "Now your law can't breathe." Dre's voice stays gentle, but the gentleness has teeth now. "You just stole order," he says. "In front of my town." Elias answers, "It was never yours." Dre nods once, as if acknowledging a brave confession. Then he raises 2 fingers, and the guards surge. Elias doesn't draw a gun. He doesn't need to. He sidesteps the first man and uses the trough rail as leverage, shoving the guard's shoulder into a post. The guard's pistol barks, but the shot goes wide, slamming into a wooden sign. Panic ripples through the crowd. Another guard swings a baton. Elias blocks with his forearm and hooks the baton with the shovel handle he'd kept near his feet, ripping it free. He doesn't beat the guard. He throws the baton into the mud. "Enough," he says, voice low. The guards don't stop. They never stop when they think numbers make them brave, and in the chaos, a hand grabs Elias's sleeve, Tom. The boy appears out of nowhere, eyes wide, breath fast. "This way!" Tom hisses, and before Elias can decide whether to ignore him, Tom yanks him into a narrow alley between a feed store and a collapsing shed, where the ground is slick with spilled water and old mud. Boots thunder behind them. A pistol cracks. Splinters jump off the wall. Tom runs like a fox in a trap, low, fast, turning corners without slowing. Elias follows without hurry, and that should be impossible, but legends move differently when they've decided they're not dying today. They burst into the back of the trough yard, where barrels are stacked, and a shallow runnel carries overflow toward the ditch. Tom darts across the runnel. 2 guards chase and hit the slick mud. One slips, crashes into the other, and both go down hard, pistols skittering into the water. Elias steps past them and uses the shovel to pin one man's wrist to the dirt without breaking it. "Get up," Elias tells them, not angry, just finished. "Go tell Dre his stamp sank." The men scramble away, humiliated and terrified, not because Elias hurt them, but because he didn't need to. Tom keeps running until they reach the edge of town, where the pump station squats in the dark like a metal animal. Steam breathes from seams. The boy stops behind a pile of scrap and finally speaks, like he's been holding a truth in his teeth. "The stamp press was just a show," Tom whispers. "The real control is at the pump." Elias looks at him. "Why tell me?" Tom swallows. "Because you're the only one who made him blink," he says. "And because he marked my tag cut last month." Tom pulls the string from his neck and shows Elias the brass tag stamped with that hateful word. Cut. "My mom got sick," Tom adds, voice cracking for half a heartbeat before he forces it flat. "Dre said water is for workers, not for weak." Elias studies the boy's face. Too young. Too hard already. "Go home," Elias says. Tom laughs once, sharp and humorless. "To what?" Elias doesn't answer because sometimes silence is the only honest thing. He looks toward the pump station door. "Stay out of sight," Elias says instead. "If you run, run away from me." Tom nods fast, as if he'll obey. As if obedience isn't the one thing hunger teaches you to fake. Inside the pump station, the air is hot and wet. Gears turn, belts whip, pipes rattle with pressure like a beast straining against a leash. The main valve wheel sits on the far wall, brass, polished, locked with a fresh seal. Not a stamp this time, a brass lock plate bound with the black double knot. Elias steps closer and hears voices behind the boiler. Dre's men are already here, waiting, because this was never about pipes. It was always about catching the legend where the town can't see. Dre steps out last, clean as ever, lantern in hand like he's bringing light to sinners. "Mr. Ward," he says gently, "you're exhausting. I offered you water. You chose theater." Elias keeps his shovel low. "You chose thirst," Elias replies. Dre sighs, almost regretful. "No," he corrects. "I chose discipline." He gestures, and two guards drag Tom into the lantern light with a pistol pressed to the boy's back. Tom's bravado evaporates. He's still standing, but his eyes are the eyes of a kid who just realized stories don't stop bullets. Dre smiles at Elias. "Look," he says, "your little fan followed you. That's the trouble with legends. They make children brave." Dre's tone turns softer. "And bravery gets children killed." Elias's jaw tightens. He does not step forward. He does not beg. Dre watches for either rage or pleading, because both can be used. Elias gives him neither. "Let him go," Elias says. Dre tilts his head. "And you walk away," he offers. "I close the valve, the town goes thirsty again, and you ride on with your story intact." He lifts the lantern slightly, so the gear teeth throw sharp shadows. "Or you touch that valve," Dre continues, "and I will hang you as a saboteur who poisoned our water. The town will thank me for saving them from you." Dre's smile is clean. "Which story do you want them to believe?" That's Dre's real weapon. Not a gun, a story. Elias understands it instantly because he's buried men who died by rumor as surely as by bullet. Elias shifts his weight half an inch, and that tiny movement is enough. A guard behind him mistakes it for a lunge and fires. The bullet slams into a pipe. A white scream of scalding steam erupts, swallowing lantern light, turning the pump station into a fogged maze. Men cough and curse. Shadows twist. Tom yanks free in the chaos and scrambles behind a crate. Dre's clean face snaps into rage. "Stop him!" he barks, the first time his voice loses its polish. Elias moves through steam like he was born in it. He doesn't shoot wildly. He uses the station like a second body. A guard rushes. Elias kicks a bucket, spills oil onto planks, and the man's boots slide out from under him. The pistol barks into the ceiling. Another swings a club. Elias blocks, twists the wrist with the shovel handle, and the club drops. A third tries to flank. Elias yanks a chain, and a heavy tool hook swings down from the rafters, slamming into the floor with a metallic boom that makes everyone hesitate. Hesitation is where a legend wins without killing. Dre backs toward the valve, eyes darting, trying to regain control. "Even if you open it," Dre shouts, "I'll close it tomorrow. I own the keys." Elias steps closer, steam curling around him like ghost cloth. "No," Elias says, "you own fear." He spots the lock plate on the valve, the black double knot tight as a promise. And fear breaks when people see it leaking. Elias doesn't go for Dre first. He goes for the lock. He pulls the small brass water key Tom gave him, slips it into the lock plate, and twists. The knot snaps. The lock gives. The valve wheel turns with a groan like an old door admitting truth. The pump shudders, pipes tremble, and outside, in the night, water surges into the main trough with a roar that sounds like relief. For one perfect second, Brinehook Wells stops being a prison. Then Dre lunges, grabbing for the wheel like he's grabbing for a throat. Tom bursts from behind the crate and tackles Dre's legs. Not strong, not clean, just desperate. Dre stumbles, furious, shoving Tom off. "Traitor!" he spits, as if a starving boy owes him loyalty. Dre snatches up a pistol from the floor, raises it at Tom. Elias steps between them and doesn't raise his gun. He raises his shovel and plants the blade into the planks, a barrier. "Enough," Elias says, low and final. Dre's hand trembles, just a little. Not fear of death. Fear of losing control in front of witnesses who can hear the water outside. Dre snaps, "You think you've freed them? They'll beg me tomorrow. They always beg." Elias leans in, close enough that Dre can smell dirt, close enough to make clean men uncomfortable. "Maybe," Elias murmurs, "but tonight, they'll remember your order needed a lock." Dre's eyes harden. He tries one last weapon. "The water's tainted," he shouts toward the door, toward the town. "He broke the pipes. He's poisoned you." Outside, the lie spreads fast, because fear is fast. People hesitate at the trough, hands hovering, unsure. Dre smiles again, faintly, because he thinks he's won. "See?" he whispers to Elias. "They don't trust you. They trust me." Elias doesn't argue. He doesn't give a speech. He walks out of the pump station into the square where the trough is overflowing, moonlight dancing on the surface. The town stares at him like he's holding a plague. Elias scoops a dipper full of water, holds it up, and lets the light catch it. Clear. Then he hands the dipper to the mother whose child can barely stand. The mother's eyes flood with terror and hope. Elias nods once. "Give him a sip," he says. The mother hesitates, then lifts the cup to her son's mouth. The boy drinks. He doesn't choke. He doesn't fall. He just breathes. Like breathing is a miracle he forgot to ask for. The crowd's fear wavers. A second person steps forward. Then a third. The lie collapses. The way lies always collapse. Slowly, then all at once. Dre stands at the edge of the lantern light, watching his control slip through his fingers like water. For the first time, his clean face looks old. "You can't stay," he says to Elias, voice tight. "They'll come for you." Elias answers calmly. They always come. Dre's eyes flick toward the broken seal on the valve, the snapped black double knot. "You don't know who tied that," Dre warns. Elias's gaze hardens. "I know enough," he says. "It wasn't you." Dre's smile returns. Thin and dangerous. "Then you're already dead," he whispers. Tom appears behind Elias, breathing hard, cheeks smudged with oil and steam. He looks smaller now that the adrenaline is draining, but his eyes are bright with something new, belief. "You did it," Tom says. Elias doesn't praise him. Elias doesn't pat his head. He only gives him one look, sharp as a warning. "Go home," Elias says. Tom swallows. "I don't have one," he answers again, quieter this time, like admitting it hurts. Elias holds the silence for a beat too long, then turns away as if the decision is easy. "Not my problem," he says, but his voice doesn't carry the cruelty it's trying to pretend. He walks toward the dark edge of town where the road disappears. Tom takes one step after him, then stops, because he knows legends don't like being followed. Behind them, people drink. Children laugh through cracked lips. The town unclenches. Elias is almost out of the square when he notices something that makes his spine go still. Hanging from the stamp table, now abandoned, now useless, is a fresh brass tag Dre didn't hand out. It isn't stamped approved or cut. It's stamped with a simple symbol, and tied to it is another black double knot, neat as handwriting. Someone left it there after the chaos. A reminder, a threat, a trail. Elias doesn't take the tag. He doesn't need to. He's already seen enough to know Brinehook Wells wasn't the end of anything. It was a test. And tests only exist when someone higher up is watching. He disappears into the night alone because that's how old legends survive, by refusing to carry what they can't protect. Tom stands in the lantern light and watches him go, fists clenched, throat tight, like he's trying to decide what kind of man he'll be when the clean monsters come back. And as the town drinks behind him, Tom looks down at his own brass tag-stamped cut and realizes something that feels like a spark in a dry world. If one old man can break a lock, then maybe a boy can learn to break a chain. And now, here's the question for you. Because it isn't Elias who has to live in Brinehook Wells after the legend rides out. It's people like Tom and people like the mother in the square. If you watched a clean man pour water into dirt while your neighbors begged, would you stay quiet to keep your place in line? Or would you risk everything to make sure no one ever gets stamped cut again?